Robert De Niro rose to Hollywood fame in the 1970s, but his stardom was indisputable in the 1980s. He began the decade leading Martin Scorsese's searing drama Raging Bull, winning his second Oscar for Best Actor. He followed it up with more hits and auteur collaborations, such as True Confessions, The King of Comedy, Once Upon a Time in America, The Untouchables, Midnight Run, and Jackknife. A shout-out to his mesmerizing bit part in Terry Gilliam's Brazil, which feels like it comes from out of nowhere. Robert De Niro has simply never felt irrelevant in his career, even in the 21st century when he seems to be comfortable making lighthearted comedies. While the 1970s include some of De Niro's most interesting work, he is perhaps at his best in the 80s. Best known for playing powerful men with strong personalities, Michael Douglas, son of actor Kirk Douglas, forever became a movie star through his leading role in the 1984 adventure comedy Romancing the Stone. He was already a success in Hollywood, being a producer of movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and The China Syndrome. Still, he earned his own recognition as a movie star in the 1980s through movies like Fatal Attraction, The War of the Roses, and Wall Street, the latter of which won him an Oscar for Best Actor. While the bulk of Douglas's fame would be defined by his work in the 90s, the 1980s saw him deliver his most unforgettable movies of his career. One of Britain's most revered actors in history, known for his intense preparation, Anthony Hopkins' name boasts numerous accolades including Oscars, BAFTAs, Emmys, as well as the Cecil B. DeMille Award and even knighthood from Queen Elizabeth II. Once part of the Royal National Theatre, his stardom began with the 1980 movie The Elephant Man, which gave Hopkins international attention and mainstream fame. He also starred in A Change of Seasons that same year, opposite Shirley MacLaine, with whom he famously did not get along with. Hopkins starred in more 80s pictures like The Bounty, The Good Father, and The Dawning. Even before he felt the need for speed in Top Gun, Tom Cruise was already a maverick of a movie star through his dashing good looks and piercing charisma. After a supporting part in the movie The Outsiders, Cruise danced his way to cinematic immortality in the 1983 film Risky Business. While his subsequent films, All the Right Moves and Legend, failed to catch fire, his role in the 1986 action epic Top Gun launched Cruise way into the stratosphere. He finished the decade working with some of the biggest directors and actors in the industry in movies like The Color of Money, Cocktail, Rain Man, and Born on the 4th of July. In the 1990s, Tom Cruise became the leading male of Hollywood, and his stardom hasn't diminished since. One of the most adored comic actors of all time, Robin Williams first burst onto Hollywood through his starring role in the sci-fi sitcom Mork and Mindy. Audiences fell in love with Williams's unique and frantic storytelling in his comedy, and in the early 80s he led a few stand-up specials for HBO. His first film to feature him in a starring role, Robert Altman's Popeye, an adaptation of the iconic cartoon character, was a box office disappointment, but Williams's performance was lauded by critics. In 1987, his star-making role in Barry Levinson's Good Morning, Vietnam earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. He was nominated again a few years later for his lead role in the 1989 film Dead Poets Society. By the 1990s, Robin Williams was virtually unstoppable, and he later expanded into non-comedic genres. His death by suicide in 2014 encouraged an outpouring of grief in and out of Hollywood. After piloting the Millennium Falcon in a galaxy far, far away, Harrison Ford instantly became one of the most famous faces in the 1980s. From his starring roles in some of the decade's biggest movies, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first film in the Indiana Jones series, Blade Runner, and 2 more Star Wars sequels, Harrison Ford transitioned into more grounded fare, like the 1985 noir crime thriller Witness, the 1986 drama The Mosquito Coast, and the 1988 rom-com Working Girl. The next decade saw Harrison Ford cement his status with starring roles in the Jack Ryan film series and other blockbusters, like Air Force One in 1997. A prolific and bankable movie star for over 4 decades, Michelle Pfeiffer experienced the bulk of her success in the 1980s. While many of her early 80s works were duds, such as 1982's Grease 2, she began to experience stardom after her performance in the 1983 crime thriller Scarface, with Al Pacino. Afterward, Michelle Pfeiffer became one of the most sought-after stars in Hollywood, with movies like Into the Night, Lady Hawk, Sweet Liberty, Amazon, Women on the Moon, The Witches of Eastwick, Married to the Mob, Tequila Sunrise, Dangerous Liaisons, and The Fabulous Baker Boys. Pfeiffer starred in movies well into the 2020s, including a recurring role as Janet Van Dyne, aka the Wasp, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise. After achieving success in the 1970s, Jack Nicholson kicked off the 1980s with Stanley Kubrick's now celebrated film version of Stephen King's The Shining, in the role of troubled author and family man Jack Torrance. Nicholson kept up his career momentum with movies like Reds, Terms of Endearment, Heartburn, The Witches of Eastwick, Ironweed, and The Postman Always Rings Twice, the latter at first garnering negative reviews, but has found renewed admiration over time. In 1989, Jack Nicholson played the iconic comic book villain the Joker, opposite Michael Keaton in Tim Burton's Batman. Nicholson ended his career with the 2010 rom-com How Do You Know, due to memory loss hindering his ability to keep acting. Even before he suited up as Batman, Michael Keaton was already a buzzworthy on-screen talent with leading roles in movies like Night Shift, Mr. Mom, Johnny Dangerously, and Beetlejuice. When Keaton was cast to play Batman, however, hardcore comic book fans took umbrage with the fact that a goofy actor known for comedies was to play the Caped Crusader. After the release of Batman, however, fans adored Keaton, as did the rest of the world, with Keaton becoming one of the biggest Hollywood stars by the 1990s. Come with him if you want to live. A former professional bodybuilder who typified the era of 1980s beefcake action movies, Arnold Schwarzenegger came to worldwide prominence primarily through the 1982 fantasy film Conan the Barbarian, a live-action film version of the pulp comics character. The movie catapulted Schwarzenegger to the stratosphere, and in 1984 he starred in James Cameron's classic sci-fi thriller The Terminator. Arnie spent the rest of the 1980s in similar features like Predator, Commando, and The Running Man, but he also dipped into comedy with movies like Red Heat and Twins. By the 1990s, Schwarzenegger was figuratively and literally one of the biggest movie stars in the world. But it was in the 1980s that Schwarzenegger felt so much larger than life. Following her acclaimed performances in the movies The Deer Hunter and Kramer vs. Kramer, Meryl Streep became one of the movie industry's biggest stars of the 1980s. She won an Oscar for her sympathetic, heart-wrenching performance in the movie Sophie's Choice, in which she plays a Holocaust survivor living in America. The rest of the decade saw even more mighty work from Streep, including Silkwood, Out of Africa, Heartburn, Ironweed, and A Cry in the Dark. The 90s saw Streep enjoy further success, and by the new millennium, Streep's name was synonymous with quality and prestige in Hollywood. After starring in George Miller's gritty classic Mad Max in 1979, Mel Gibson leapt from Australia's filmmaking scene to his native America to become one of the decade's most popular stars. In addition to both Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, Gibson expanded his movie stardom to include features like The Year of Living Dangerously, The Bounty, The River, Tequila Sunrise, and the first 2 movies in the Lethal Weapon series. The 90s and 00s saw greater fame for Gibson, including work as a director, though Gibson's ungainly demonstrations of racism and anti-Semitism saw him blacklisted for over a decade.